You may have seen some headlines about a new study on soybean oil as a unique contributor to obesity. But this is really a pretty misleading interpretation. So today we're going to take a look at what this study actually found, and it was definitely interesting. But the takeaways are a lot more nuanced than most of the news coverage I've seen. Hello, I'm Monica Reinagel, and this is the Nutrition Diva podcast, a show where we take a closer look at nutrition news, research, and trends so that you can make more informed decisions about what you eat. If you follow nutrition news, and honestly, even if you don't, you have probably seen some coverage of a new study that claimed to reveal a biological mechanism that makes soybean oil more fattening than other types of fat. Now, the study in question does suggest that the way our bodies process different types of fats might play a role in whether they are burned for energy or stored as fat. But there is quite a bit more to this story. For a lot of people, the takeaway seemed to be that we need to avoid seed oils or maybe outlaw processed foods. My takeaways were a bit different. So let's start with the study itself. It was published recently by researchers at UC Riverside, and it involved juvenile mice, so the equivalent of toddlers, who grew to adulthood over the course of the study. But the mice grew up eating different diets. So one group ate a diet that was enriched with soybean oil, and specifically, about 10% of their calories came from linoleic acid. That's the primary fat found in soybean oil. And the other group ate a diet with the same amount of fat and calories, but it was enriched with coconut oil instead of soybean oil. As these mice grew to full size, the group that was eating the coconut oil diet maintained a lean adult weight. But the group that was eating the soybean oil diet, they kept gaining weight and they became obese. They developed fatty livers. Their metabolic health took a nosedive. So what could possibly explain this? Well, the researchers had one more twist up their sleeve. They also fed these two diets to a group of mice that had been genetically modified so that they lacked a specific set of liver enzymes that are involved in the metabolism of dietary fats. In this genetically modified cohort, the group eating the coconut oil grew to adult size and then stopped gaining weight, just like the unmodified group. But, and here's the payoff, the genetically modified mice who were fed the soybean oil enriched diet, they also remained lean. So the only mice in this study who became obese were the ones without the genetic modification and who were eating the soybean oil enriched diet. And this is the group of mice that is thought to most closely resemble the American public. Most of us have not been genetically modified, and most of us are actually eating twice as much linoleic acid as a percentage of our total calories as these mice were. So at this point, the headline writers, they've got their story. Linoleic acid, or soybean oil, or maybe seed oil, drives obesity and other fats don't. But that is not actually the story here. Nor is the advice to avoid soybean or seed oil the relevant takeaway. The real story here is that these scientists designed an elegant experiment that shed some light on how our bodies, or the bodies of mice anyway, deal with different sources of fat and how that might contribute to obesity. So when a normal mouse's liver encounters polyunsaturated fats, such as the linoleic acid in soybean and other plant-based oils, enzymes convert that fat into metabolites called oxylipins. These oxylipins turn out to be signaling molecules. They send a signal to the body that says, okay, store this energy as fat. Now, this is not necessarily a problem unless this particular type of fat is being consumed in very high quantities. Now, incidentally, omega-3s are also polyunsaturated fats, and they are also processed into oxylipins through this same metabolic pathway. So theoretically, if we ate sufficient amounts of omega-3s, this could also promote obesity. However, virtually none of us consume enough omega-3 fats to be a concern on this count. Saturated fats, like those found in coconut oil, and monounsaturated fats, like those found in olive oil, they have a different molecular structure that essentially makes them invisible to those specific enzymes. And because they cannot be converted into oxylipins, they follow a different metabolic pathway. Instead of preferentially being stored as fat, they are more readily burned for energy. Now, that doesn't mean that they cannot be stored as fat. Excess calories are always going to be stored as fat one way or another. It just means that it's not their default metabolic pathway. Now, because the genetically modified mice couldn't produce that particular liver enzyme, they couldn't convert polyunsaturated oil into oxylipins. So, instead of storing it as fat, their mitochondria burned it for heat and energy, similar to the way the body handles saturated fats like those found in coconut oil. One other thing I find interesting is that the liver appears to get more and more efficient at converting polyunsaturated fats, or PUFAs, into oxylipins as we get older. Only in this case, efficiency is not a good thing. It means that the PUFAs we eat as adults are more likely to be stored as fat than they were when we were children. And this could be one reason why we seem more prone to weight gain as we get older, even if our diet hasn't really changed all that much. Essentially, as we age, we may get too good at processing these fats into the signals that promote storage. Now, if your brain works the way mine does, you might be wondering, okay, well then why can't we just suppress this enzyme in people in order to treat or maybe even prevent obesity? Well, the researchers actually tried that. They gave some of the non-modified mice a drug that was designed to block that specific enzyme responsible for converting PUFAs into oxylipins, but it failed completely. The mice still became obese. And as for attempting actual gene editing in humans, well, that remains a dream for now because the gene in question is sort of a master switch. It doesn't just control the liver, it also regulates the kidneys and the pancreas. In fact, the genetically altered mice developed smaller kidneys as a side effect. So flipping this genetic switch in humans could theoretically fix your waistline while accidentally damaging some of your other organs. But this certainly remains an interesting area for future research. Okay, that's the deal with this study, but now I want to talk about what, if anything, this actually means to adult humans navigating the real-world foodscape. Because here is where the media coverage really went off the rails. First off, when we talk about the effects of a diet that is high in soybean oil, we are not talking about a diet that is high in soybeans. Whole soy foods like tofu, tempeh, edamame, soy milk, and plant-based meats, these are excellent sources of high-quality plant protein and fiber. They have a completely different nutritional profile than oil that is extracted from the bean. So, if you enjoy tofu stir fries or plant-based burgers, or you like to put soy milk on your cereal, this study is not a reason to stop doing that. The concentration of linoleic acid in whole soy foods is much lower, and you're also getting all that beneficial fiber and protein alongside it. Secondly, soybean oil was the substance that was used in this particular study, but the real finding here is not about soybean oil in particular, but linoleic acid in general. They could have used sunflower or safflower or corn oil or any number of other vegetable oils to provide the PUFAs that were converted into oxylipins. For that matter, large quantities of flax oil, which is rich in omega-3 PUFAs, could have had the same results. Thirdly, this study is also not a blanket indictment of seed oils, because seed oils are not all high in PUFAs. Canola oil, for example, is 60 to 65% lower in linoleic acid than corn or soybean oil. Another false conclusion I've seen in response to this study is that avoiding or maybe even banning processed foods is the answer. And this is based on the assumption that most of the linoleic acid in our diets is coming from ultra-processed foods. So I have two issues with this conclusion. It is true that processed foods that are high in fat may be high in linoleic acid because the oils that are used in these foods generally tend to be polyunsaturated. But not all ultra-processed foods are high in fat. There are half a dozen ultra-processed foods that are a regular part of my diet, primarily because they are convenient ways for me to get more protein or more fiber, or they're foods that allow me to eat healthy even when I'm on the road. And while ultra-processed foods are drawing a lot of fire these days, there is another category of foods that may contribute even more PUFAs and calories to the standard American diet, and yet this category seems to be flying below the radar. And I'm talking about fast food, fried foods, carry-out, restaurant meals. These are frequently high in fat and also may be quite high in PUFAs because those oils are relatively inexpensive and they have a very high smoke point. So in other words, you could be stressing out about trace amounts of sunflower oil in your oat milk, and all the while, the massive dose of vegetable oil in your Friday night takeout is completely invisible to you. So let's pull all of this together. What does this mouse study actually mean for how we should eat? Well, if it works in people the way it works in mice, and that is a very big if, but if it does, then diets that are very high in PUFAs may contribute to weight gain. But even if that is true, that doesn't mean that we need to completely avoid or eliminate this category of fats from the diet. Indeed, linoleic acid is an essential fatty acid. Our bodies need it in order to function properly. We just want to avoid diets that are very high in this specific type of fat. So to that end, number one, be selective with your oils. Since we can't turn off the enzyme pathway, like the mice in the study, it may make sense to limit how much fuel we are putting into it. So for your home cooking, prioritize oils that are rich in monounsaturated fats. Olive oil, avocado oil, canola oil are all great choices that don't feed this potential fat storage pathway. Number two, rather than trying to avoid all processed and packaged foods, be smart and strategic about the ones that you choose. Not all processed foods are a problem. Some even provide welcome solutions. The real culprits are those that are high in fat and, most likely, linoleic acid, but also low in nutrients. So the cookies, the chips, the snacks. And third, remember to pay attention to the prepared and processed foods that may not come with a nutrition facts label or an ingredient list. So reducing your intake of deep-fried foods may do more to lower your linoleic acid load than obsessing over every little ingredient label. I hope that helps clarify some of the confusion around this recent study and puts it into better perspective for you. If you have a question or a topic you'd like me to tackle on the podcast, you can email me at nutrition@quickanddirtytips.com. And if you'd like to find out about having me speak at your next in-person or your virtual event, you can learn more at wellnessworkshere.com. Nutrition Diva is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Holly Hutchings is our director of podcasts. Steve Riekeberg is our audio engineer. Morgan Christensen heads up podcast operations and advertising. Rebecca Sebastian is our manager of marketing and publicity. And Nat Hoops is our marketing and operations assistant. Thanks to all of them, and thanks to you for listening.